No.
Wow, doesn't that sound good? Send a cup this way. The long
It's
day.
Me too.
because here in the Philippines it's 5:30 in the morning.
Where you are, it's 5:30 in the morning.
Yeah, in the
Okay.
Philippines. So,
Okay. So if I I start my day at that time with a cup of coffee, and it feels like I need to end my day at that time with a cup of coffee.
right, right.
Mean.
I will finish
Okay,
my
then you're
shift
good to
at
go.
8 a.m.
Okay.
Thank you, Harry.
Thanks, Harry.
Bye bye. Have a
Bye.
great day.
Thank you. Yeah, Phil, I just wanted to tell you, you can stop me at any time. It's really important. Anything they put in the chat, just say, Deb, by the way, so and so is just said such and such in the chat, and
Mhm.
wanted to know what you thought about this. It's okay with me if you interrupt me. That's fine. Or
Okay.
find a time when I have a break so we don't wait until the end to answer those questions. I like having the dialogue, and I'm okay with you just chiming in.
Okay. No, no problem.
Okay. I know that's a little bit nuancy, a little hard to kind of figure out how to do it. So I figured I'd just give as much feedback as I could, and we can find our way of working.
That's actually right because I'm not used to interrupting someone, so
Of course.
I'll try my best.
You know what? I was thinking about that exact thing from the last time, and I thought, you're probably not really, that's not what you've been used to doing. So I needed to just let you know that that's okay with me. You can just say, excuse me, so one of our learners has a question or a comment. So that's just fine.
Okay, perfect. So I'll learn how to do that.
That takes it.
But don't worry. So I'll keep moderating the chat and inform you.
Okay. Really good.
Anyway, so I think people are will start coming in a few seconds. So I'll just be in the background. Okay.
All right, Phil. Thank you.
All right.
Hi, Anna. Hey, Barbara.
Hey, Deb.
How are you? Good to have you back. Hello, Lorraine.
Will this session be approximately an hour?
Yes.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. And we'll just give it another minute here. We were waiting for a few more folks, I think. Is anybody here new to get set up? Anyone new to my classes?
I am.
Okay, Anna, well, welcome. I'm glad to have you here. I hope you enjoy the session and you'll come back for more of my cooking classes. I just finished one in the kitchen. I was doing bean salads. So now I'm at my desk, but we do some kitchen classes too. Where are you from, Anna?
Baltimore, Maryland.
Maryland. Okay, Baltimore. Well, we're practically neighbors. I'm from Pennsylvania.
Whereabouts? Because I grew up in Pennsylvania.
Well, you couldn't possibly be from York, could you?
No, further north.
Okay. Yeah, I'm in York, Pennsylvania.
You know where Wilkes-Barre is?
Oh, sure. Yes. My college roommate was from Wilkes-Barre.
Okay.
Yeah, I do indeed. I've been there several times. Okay, there's May's joining us. Yeah, actually, yep, a couple of roommates from that area and the mountaintop area.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm. Hi, May. Welcome. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen so we can get started, and I'm sure there will be some other folks that may join along the way, but that's okay. We'll get them caught up, and we've got a lot to cover, so here we go. Let me first introduce myself, especially to you, Anna. You've not met me before. My name's Deb Livingston, and we already determined that I'm from York, Pennsylvania. My background is in adult and organizational development. So I've done a lot of training and working with managers and coaching leaders, that kind of thing in my career, and a lot of training. So now I'm doing some fun things with cooking around and training. And so it's actually a kick. It's a little bit more fun. I get to talk about things I really enjoy. I'm an organic gardener, so I like to cook what I grow in my garden. And I think that eating whole foods is a healthy way to go. So lots of my classes are influenced by that. That's not to say I don't have my moments of decadence. I certainly do. So uh, at Get Set Up, I think that most of you have been here before, know how we operate. We learn from each other. So I bring information to the table. I bring a facilitation style that I hope will involve all of you. And I really invite you to turn on your camera and be part of a dynamic conversation here. You unmute yourself and chat. We have a pretty small group. And so it's a lot more fun when we can see each other and we can share ideas. So I do invite you to do that. I understand that that's not always possible. Hey, Alma, good to have you back. And that's just, I'll just put it out there to you and invite you to come on camera. We do record these sessions, and you can always request the copy of a recording from help@getsetup.io. And that's also the email address for any kind of technical problems that you may have, or if by some chance you don't get the email that I send after the class. And this is a very important email because it does a couple of things. It gives you all the information that I share in this class, for one. So all the recipes, all the things that I show you today will be in that email for you to click on and go to. So I want you to be able to have those recipes. If for some reason you don't get them, then Help It Get Set Up will help you get them. But do check your spam email in case it went there. The other things that email does is give you an opportunity to give us feedback on this class and on any ideas that you might have for future classes. So click on the feedback button, tell us what you think. And also go to the schedule from there and book yourself a class. That's a great place to also invite friends. So we like to see that people send out an invitation and bring a few friends along with them to another class later. So that's what that email is all about. It's kind of a one-stop shop. We are doing this class by live stream, so I want to welcome anyone who is here by live stream. And I invite you to come and participate just the way this group is, and hopefully you'll join on camera and be part of the discussion. That's the best way to participate. Get Set Up is not paid for anything that we may represent to you in the way of products or services or websites or anything like that, nor am I. So there's no financial relationship. So when I was excited about creating these classes, I created this Soups from Scratch class. I thought I was going to accomplish, well, you can't imagine. I'm embarrassed to say how much I thought I could accomplish in an hour. And I ended up really pulling back on this class and breaking it into, at this point, I'm up to 4 classes on just soup. So this class is the starting point. This is the foundation. We're going to talk a little bit about some benefits of soup that you may or may not know, and some soup terms just to get ourselves on the same wavelength, make sure we're talking about the same things. And then we're going to really focus on making broth and stock, because this is where your flavor resides. This is where you begin building the flavor profile for a really tasty soup from scratch. And after we've finished talking about those recipes, we're going to take a look at the basic soup making steps. So is there anyone who's just brand new to making soup at home from scratch?
Well, I'm sort of new. I did make tomato soup because I have an Instant Pot now.
Yes.
And I have a favorite recipe for tomato soup. But other than that, that's probably, and then now I got another recipe for taco soup. I like that. That's my second favorite.
Okay.
But I was thinking the other day, when you buy these boxes of broth or stock, I was thinking, what's the difference between a broth and a stock? So
glad
maybe I'll learn that today.
You absolutely will. I'm so glad you said that, because that was one of the questions that I thought of. I thought we need to talk about that in this class. So we will. Yeah.
Okay.
And those broths and stocks, they are not cheap. They're not inexpensive. You pay a lot of money for those in a cardboard carton.
The cardboard, yeah.
Yeah. So we're going to show how to do that for a lot less too. And so those soup making steps are for someone who's just as you're getting started, you kind of need to know what are the basic steps. And every soup maker is different, but if you have some basic guidelines, you sort of know how it all goes together, why you do what you do, when you do it. And so we'll go through those. And I have just a couple of recipes today, and hopefully we'll get to the point of being able to share those, but if not, you're going to get them in any case so that you can give them a try. So is there something that you came here particularly to learn as we're getting started? Because I want to make sure that I'm addressing, aside from learning the difference between a broth and a stock, anybody else have some things they definitely want to walk away with today? Anyone? Okay, so you're going to walk away with a lot then of things that I have thought that you might like to know. So we'll see if that hits the mark. So talking about the benefits of soup, I thought that there were some interesting things that I learned when I did a little background research on this. And I always like to look at what the research says. And I did in fact find research about soup. And I found out that research-based findings are that soup eaters have a higher diet quality score. Believe it or not, I suppose it's because of the nature of the kinds of soups that we eat. Now, perhaps if we're eating all cream soups and cream of crab and all those buttery soups, that may not be the case, but a lot of us eat brothy soups, maybe chicken noodle soup or vegetable soups. And so we tend to have a higher diet quality score overall. And in fact, without soup in our diet, we are 40% more likely to be overweight. Now, isn't that an interesting tidbit? So we are consuming a lot of vegetables when we eat soup for the most part. And that means we're consuming a lot of complex carbohydrates in the vegetables that we eat, and they have a lot of fiber in them. So that is helping us move things through our system, helping us to feel full longer, and also lowering the risk of developing type 2 diabetes, because fiber and the protein and the nutrients in the soup can really help reduce inflammation. Interesting thing about the makeup of a soup is that the potassium in the soup and the sodium in the soup tend to balance one another out. So one thing that people tend to have a problem with, or a concern about, not a problem, but a concern, is that they're afraid of getting too much salt in their soup. And that's really true when you buy canned soup. There's a lot of sodium in those soups. So a good way to reduce sodium is to make your own soup. But when you make your own soup, because you're using a lot of vegetables and you're using ingredients that have a high level of potassium, and you're adding salt, the potassium is what helps remove sodium from the body. If you've ever been on blood pressure, if you're on blood pressure medicine, It may be that at some point your doctor might have tried you on potassium pills first. And lots of folks have a good success rate with just taking potassium pills to help move sodium out of their body and reduce blood pressure. And, and excuse me. Eating soup increases our water intake. And I have to increase my water intake because something's going on in my throat. Which does help us to prevent dehydration. We have a hard time reminding ourselves to drink. We don't get that same thirst trigger that we might have gotten as we were younger. So it's a good idea to do whatever we can to increase our water intake and prevent that dehydration. And last but not least, the research really shows that it's good for cold symptoms. So we heard that was an old wives' tale or a grandmother, that's what grandmother said. And it's borne out by research. It really does reduce inflammation. So chicken soup not only makes us feel better, it actually makes us better and reduces the symptoms of a cold. So those are the things that I had as health benefits or benefits of soup. Could you add anything from your own experience or your own thoughts? How about it just tastes good?
I would say it extends my week in that I don't have to cook every day. If I've made some soup, I go, oh, well, for lunch, I'll just have some soup because I made soup last night.
Yeah.
Or then the next, skip a day, maybe then I go, oh, okay, I'll have soup for dinner, especially like chicken soup. And if you don't feel good, you want chicken soup or something like that.
Yep, for sure. It's a really great way to extend your meals for the week and to have it. You might have it one night as a meal. You could have it another day as a side or a little bit of a snack or something like that. So with a little bit of work, you can make a lot of soup with a little bit of time.
Yeah, soup and salad is always good.
Yes, soup and salad. Exactly. That's what I'm having for dinner tonight. I just had the bean salad class and I made up 2 different bean salads. I have so much bean salad. You should be coming over for supper. And I just made a soup that I'm going to showcase or talk about tomorrow in the cream and blended soup class. So I make all these recipes before I send them out to you. And so I know that I like them and at least I like them and can pass
Cool.
that. Do you guys make extra soup for the freezer when you make soup? Anybody do that?
I have.
Yeah.
Actually, I have some chicken soup in the freezer and I have some tomato soup in the freezer because it just turns out I think I tomato soup myself out because I was making it like, I don't know, once a month or every 3 weeks or something for the summer when I first got my Instant Pot. And it's been during the pandemic. And I did it so many times that when I was looking forward to the tomato soup and when I was going to eat it, I'm going, I just don't feel like having it now. So I froze it.
That's a good idea. That's great. Kathleen, can I ask you, do you have a lot of noise in the background there?
I don't.
Okay, that's thank you, Barbara. That's it. I really want you to take yourself off mute to talk and then just put yourself on mute because sometimes, thank you. So yeah, I know sometimes you can just make so much, you can only eat so much soup, but then if you put it in the freezer container and you come back a few months later, you're so glad. It's like a little treasure to have it there. So it's nice. Okay, and Barbara, I did want to ask you what kind of soups you freeze.
Chicken and rice.
Oh,
I usually eat it all, I eat on it all week for lunch.
it gets better and better, doesn't it?
Yes.
All right, so
There.
just a few soup terms then. Just going to mute you up there, Barbara. A few soup terms. These 3 ingredients are a key foundational ingredient in many, many soups. And it's carrots, onion, and celery. Does anyone know what that grouping of vegetables might be called in cooking terms? Anybody have an idea of that? See, I want you to be able to throw around this terminology.
Mirepoix.
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 Mirepoix. Got that, everyone? Mirepoix.
How do you spell it?
There you go. You see it?
Oh, a friend of mine, she said she had taken some cooking classes and she used that term, sometime during the pandemic, it was just before the shutdown, I think. And we were talking about foods and things and her cooking. And she said, oh, you just something about, and she used that term. And I'm going, I have no clue what you're talking about. So now I see what she's talking about.
Now you know. And in Italian, it is sofrito, and that may be with leeks instead of onions. This is all very varied. They use whatever, but that would be the term in Italian. In German, it's Suppengren, and that may typically come in a soup making bundle that one would buy at the grocery store or the store. And then in Creole cooking, when we make jambalaya or we make what else do we make in Creole cooking? Gumbo and other Creole cooking, it's called Holy Trinity. And in that case, we're subbing out the carrots for green peppers. So each type of cuisine has its flavor foundation of this nature. That is what is sauteed in some fat to release the flavors of those vegetables. We don't steam it in water. We do it in fat because the flavors here are fat soluble. So it allows, the fat allows those things to be brought forth into your soup. So what is this second thing that we have here, this little bundle of joy? You know what this is called? You can unmute yourself.
My guess is herbs.
It is herbs.
Garnet something.
Is there a
Yeah,
name for it?
bouquet.
Garnet bouquet.
Bouquet garni. Alice, did you say that correctly?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Bouquet garni.
Bouquet garni. So another French term. We're kind of going with the French terms here. And this could be any number of different herbs. In this particular case, it is bay and some thyme and some rosemary. It looks like maybe there's a little parsley in there. And you can put that in the very beginning of a soup making step, or in the very beginning of the soup making process. But that doesn't stop you from adding more herbs later on in the process. You're going to see that there's plenty of opportunity to lay flavors to build a good soup. And then there's this group of things which goes together here with this. But what would we call the items that we add that give this pungent aroma, the garlics, the gingers, maybe the peppercorns and things? It's collectively, they're called something. Anybody want to take a stab?
Stock.
Well, they're used for stock for sure. So these are called aromatics. The aromatics, because they produce aroma and flavor in the soup. And they usually come in right around this time. So sometimes you'll add, and this can vary, but you can add these things in right on top. After these have softened a little bit, typically adding some of these in would be the way to go. And then before the broth, before you would add the broth. So you'd saute them for a while and then add your broth and then add your bouquet garni. And what is this little lovely up here? Anybody have these?
Immersion blender.
Immersion blender.
It is an immersion blender. And so we use the immersion blender to puree soups if we want to without taking them out of the pan. Does anybody own an immersion blender?
I got one to make the tomato soup.
All right. How's it work for you?
It scared me half to death once I figured out how to turn it on, but now I'm not too much afraid of it. I mean, I'm still afraid of it, but.
Okay. Anybody else have any experiences with them?
I use it on my bean soup to make it thicken it up.
So you just thicken part of it.
Yes.
Yes, it's great for that, I think. Sometimes immersion blenders are a little tedious if you're trying to get a completely pureed soup because it takes a while to get that done. And so sometimes I use my regular blender for that. But if I'm just trying to get part of it blended, so I'm thickening my soup, it's really a great tool. So, yep, immersion blender. So now we get to your question, Kathleen. What is the difference between a broth and a stock? Well, the word broth comes from the term to boil, and it really refers to a liquid that is intended pretty much to be consumed on its own. And it is and if we make a vegetable mixture where we're only using vegetables, we call it a broth. We don't call it a stock because a stock by definition uses bones. So a broth can use vegetables only. It can use vegetables and meat, or it could use meat only and would be considered a broth. So you might think about making those broths and sipping on them through the day, or they could be just used on their own. And however, since the vegetable broth cannot be called technically a stock because it doesn't have any bones in it, we also call it, we call it a stock when we use it in the making of a soup. So stock by definition not only has bones in it, but also is used to make something else, typically a soup, a sauce, something like that. And then we have bone broth. So how many of you are familiar with the latest kind of rage to sell bone broth in the store? Yeah, what's that all about, Barbara?
Oh, I guess getting all the gelatin out, all the protein out of the bones, it's good for your body.
Yeah.
That's what I think of.
Yeah, that's the marketing of the bone broth right now. It's genius really, because they are using everything, every part of the animal. They've even found a way now to market in a very expensive way this bone broth. But it's true, it does provide a lot of health benefits, and we'll talk more about that in
Question.
yeah.
On these three items, the broth, the stock, and the bone broth,
Mhm.
are they interchangeable in your soups?
Well, this is going to be much heartier for you. So typically this is something that is what you would use in your soups. This could be the same as well. There's really no difference. This is beef, and it's been, this is a beef bone broth. I'm only separating these because it has become such a marketing term. They call it bone broth. It's really stock. It's made like stock. So it's just confusing. So
And you said stock has bone in it also, right?
stock has bone. Stock is this is misnamed by marketing out in the world.
Okay.
Okay. But it really, maybe they're just saying that they're calling it bone broth because they want you to just drink it. They want you to drink it as a health beverage. A hot cup of bone broth is going to provide you with collagen and nutrients from those bones. And a broth was intended to be sipped on its own. Could you use it in a soup? Absolutely.
Oh, okay.
You absolutely could. And maybe it'll become more clear as we go along. And don't get too hung up on all of this because in the store, they really kind of use everything interchangeably. But I thought you might find it interesting just to know where the differences lie and why they were called different things.
Deb, I have a question.
Yeah, Barbara.
We eat a lot of chicken, so I usually boil up the chicken bones for a very long time. And I like to do organic. Does it matter, an organic chicken? Because I think of the regular store-bought chicken has all the, antibiotics. Is it better to do organic? Is there any difference when you're cooking up the bones?
My personal preference is to use organic because I think that whatever the animal is eating is what we're taking in. No.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, is it terrible? Should you not use your chicken bones if they're not organic? I wouldn't go there. I think that
Okay.
shouldn't waste, but yeah, if you can do the organic, that's great. So what I love about vegetable broth or stock, whatever we want to call it here, no bones, is that you can make this broth for pennies, for literally pennies. So when you see how easy this is, you'll never want to go out and spend $2 or $3 a carton on a carton of vegetable broth again. And it is really tied up in saving your scraps. So when you're working in the kitchen through the week and you're peeling your onions or peeling your garlic and your carrots, and you have the celery ends and the ends of leeks or the tops of leeks, you know, those big coarse green tops of leeks, you wash all of those very well, put them in a freezer bag and put them in the freezer and save them until you're ready to make broth. And you're going to be able to use those to make your vegetable broth. And it's pretty simple to make it. Just following the guideline of half solids to half water in your pot. And I use a crock pot. So sometimes if I'm really going to it in the kitchen, I might be chopping a lot of things, and I'll put whatever I've just chopped right in the crock pot. That's the best of everything. Put it all right in there. Get my bag out of the freezer, whatever I've been saving. And then if I feel like I'm still a little light on some vegetables, I might chop up an onion or a couple of pieces of celery or a carrot and throw it in there. But I don't worry about peeling it. I just wash these things really well. You don't have to take the shells off of garlic. You don't have to take the shells off of onions. It's not a lot of work. You just throw it in the crock pot, cover it with water, or you throw it on the stove, and then you can do it for an hour on the stove, 5 to 6 hours in the crock pot. You know, it's nice to have it go for a while because it just gets deeper and more flavorful. And then at the end of that time, you just strain it. And let's look at the recipe a little more closely. This is a recipe that you can use. I think that once you get started, you'll find that you can get comfortable and not worry so much about following a recipe. But this will give you some guidelines. If you start with using a yellow onion, quarter it, a couple of cloves of garlic. Again, you don't have to peel them. You just throw them in the way they are. 3 carrots chopped, 3 stalks of celery chopped, just rough chop. You don't have to dice them in small pieces or anything. And then 3 cups of veggie scraps and some sprigs of thyme and parsley. Use, if you can, use the fresh herbs. Sprig of rosemary, a handful of, well, not a handful, but a few black peppercorns, and then 8 to 10 cups of water. So that gives you some sense of the ratio there. And what your scraps, ideal scraps are the onion skins and tops, things we just talked about. You can even put in some too soft tomatoes, you know, those little wizened up cherry tomatoes you don't want to put in a salad, but you hate to throw away. You can put those in. You can put wilted greens in, even spinaches or even lettuces, and any of your summer squash or zucchini peels and so on. Now, you're putting those all in the pot. There's just not much to say there. You're just cooking them for the number of hours we talked about, and then you're straining them. And it will keep in glass jars in the refrigerator for a week, or you can freeze it for quite some time, several months. And just a little tip.
Are you sending us this recipe?
Yep, you will get all the recipes.
Oh.
Every recipe. So you might want to consider avoiding using things that might make your broth taste bitter. And sometimes the cruciferous vegetables like broccoli and cauliflower and Brussels sprouts and cabbage can make your broth more bitter. Some people like the way that flavors their broth, and so it's a matter of taste. I would say if you're going to use any of these, you would just use a little bit and see what you think of that. The same thing is true of asparagus. Asparagus imparts a very strong flavor to your broth or your stock. And so if you use just a little bit sparingly, those ends that you break off, you could use, especially if you're going to make cream of asparagus soup. Then I would say go ahead and put that into your veggie broth if you're going to make your veggie broth for your asparagus soup base. You might want to also avoid vegetables that are too starchy. So things like potatoes and corn, winter squash, those would make your broth more cloudy. And you might not care about that, but just be aware that it does change the appearance then of your final soup product. May or may not matter. Okay. questions, thoughts about that? Does it look easy enough? Yeah. So I have had somebody come to this class who says that she has a weekly ritual now. She never made her own. And now every week she just makes a pot of vegetable stock and has it for on hand for whatever it is that she wants to make. And then there's chicken stock. So this is made with bones. Just to reiterate, stock is made with bones. It does become really gelatinous, and that's a good thing. That's all that collagen and the proteins from the connective tissues. And it can be made with or without vegetables, herbs, and spices. So you might want just a plain meat stock that doesn't have all those other flavorings. That's perfectly fine. Or you might want something a little more robust and complex with the other ingredients here. That's good too. And it is a very strong, it can become a very strong stock. So it can stand up to being diluted a little bit when you're making your soup. And you'll see this sometimes in recipes where it says, well, add 4 cups of stock and 2 cups of water, something like that. So you can do that. And you can also add some juices. Tomato juice is a typical kind of juice that might get added to a soup along with the stock to give it a tomato flavor.
What is the picture on the right and the picture on the bottom? Yeah, what is it showing?
Yeah, this is the chilled stock. So it becomes very like Jell-O.
Oh,
And that's the gelatin, that's the collagen coming out of the bones. So it gets firm like that when it is chilled. And then this is the fat that comes to the top after the stock has
so
been.
do you discard the fat?
Great question. I'm glad you asked that one. You see this is how you might, if you want to keep soup or stock in the refrigerator for a while because you want to use it up, you might want to consider putting it in a jar like this because it's good use of space. And what happens if you do it warm, not hot so much, but warm, is that the fat rises to the top. This is probably still warm, and it creates this little fat seal at the top of your jar. I like that. I keep it because it keeps my stocks fresh longer. I can keep it far longer in the refrigerator if it's got that fat seal on it. As soon as I take it off, it starts to become, the countdown begins. I better use it. So some folks like to take that fat and use it for cooking. It's perfectly fine, especially if you have an organic chicken where you feel okay about the fat there. But having that fat, you can remove it too. If you don't want to have fat in your soup, then just take it off. It's hard, it's easy to remove, and you will have a fat-free stock. Okay, does that answer your question?
So it's a matter of choice.
It is a matter of choice. There are many uses for that fat. I would certainly keep it on there until you're ready to use, if you're using
Right,
it.
okay.
So here's a recipe. We've got a couple of chicken carcasses. Again, this is not that specific. You can do a lot with this. So 1 or 2 chicken carcasses. Some people like to use those rotisserie chicken bones. The other thing that you can do is save all your bones and put them in a bag and then get them out of the freezer at a time when you have enough of them and you're ready to make, if you want to make a big batch. You can use that and filtered water, and that's it. That's your stock. But then you have optional ingredients. You can add the vegetables, the herbs, a splash of white wine, splash of apple cider vinegar, and then chicken feet, heads, and necks. You can use those. So anybody have any experience with using chicken feet? So I have not used them. I don't have anything against them. I just don't have a place that I really think of to go and get them. But if they're cleaned, I would use them. They impart a real gold, rich color to your broth, a lot of richness to it. And heads, I'm not too interested in that, but if you can find cleaned heads, it's a cultural thing. And then the necks that come, there's no reason why you can't use the giblets that come with your chicken. The only one to avoid would be the liver. That would make your stock bitter. And I would say that that splash of apple cider vinegar, I would probably put up here in this column, up in the, with the bones. And why do we add, anybody have a thought about why we would add it? So a splash of apple cider vinegar? Any ideas?
Gets the collagen out of the bones.
It does
It
leach.
helps.
It leaches the nutrients out of the bones. You're absolutely right. It's that acidic thing that breaks down the bones. So just a splash. You don't want to, you're not trying to flavor it. You're trying to just put enough in there. It doesn't take much. And so you're just going to boil them, and maybe when it comes to a boil, there might be some stuff that comes to the top. Just skim that off. But now you're going to simmer this instead of for an hour or 3 or 4 in the crock pot or 5. You're going to simmer it for 8 to 24 hours. So this goes really nicely in the crock pot overnight on a slow, slow simmer. And if you want to add parsley, add it at the end, because that's when the flavor of the parsley will be retained. If you put it in too early, it just kind of goes away. You can keep it in the refrigerator for up to a week, unless you have that fat disc on there, that it will last longer. The smell factor will tell you if you've got bad stock or not. And you can freeze it as well. Questions about chicken stock? So beef bone broth isn't a whole lot different. There are a couple of additional steps that we'll go through. Again, this is because it's being considered as kind of a health tonic. It's for that reason made with a variety of bones. It's not just being made for soup consumption. It's made with a variety of bones because different bones have different characteristics and qualities. So joint bones, for instance, have more connective tissue, more collagen. Marrow bones get to the blood, the bone marrow, and so they pull the B vitamins and the other vitamins that are in that marrow, the other minerals and things. Well, the minerals mostly from the bone shafts, so calcium and so on. So long leg bones and things are another type of bone. And again, you can do this with or without vegetables. This is the whole enchilada right here, everything. And again, it gets gelatinous like this. You see that, Kathleen? It's like Jell-O again. And if we look, oops. If we take a look here, the steps in this process, where it's different from the last is that we might take some moments to blanch the bones first and to get rid of some of the impurities that are in those bones. That all kinds of stuff bubbles to the top. So if you blanch them for 15 to 20 minutes and then drain and rinse the bones and clean the pot, you're going to start with a cleaner bone and end up with a cleaner product at the end. And then you can roast those bones. This is a difference. Roast the bones and any vegetables you might be using in the oven at high heat, 450 degrees. Do that for about an hour, toss it about halfway through, toss it around a little bit. And then put the bones back in the stock pot. If you're using this recipe, you might consider 2 stock pots. Just depends on how big your pots are. Add bay leaves. You want to make sure your bones are always submerged. So sometimes the water will tend to evaporate out, boil away. Keep adding. Your bones should always be submerged. And again, you're going to simmer. Longer is better. 8 to 12 hours, 24 is even better. And then you can either, well, this says set aside the broth to cool, and you can add ice cubes to hasten it. That's true of the other broth as well. I do want to just say this: when you make a large quantity of stock or any kind of soup, it's important to cool it down quickly. And if you leave it sit in a very large stock pot, very hot for a long time, it can go bad, can go bad. So it can start to ferment. Best example of that is my church one year made big pots of chicken corn soup. That's a thing around here. And they left the pots sit for the soup to cool down naturally. And when they came back later to do something with the soup and to sell it, it had all started to work. It was fermenting, the corn was fermenting, and they had to throw it all away. So you can sit it in a sink full of ice water. That's one way to cool it down very easily. I have stainless steel pots. Sometimes they hold the heat for a really long time. So I might just pour my soup into another pot and then do the whole sink cooling process. So just be aware of that. You don't want any kind of bacteria or bad things to happen to your soup. Basic soup making steps. I promised you that I would go through a couple of the steps, even though these are ones that vary from soup maker to soup maker. But this makes sense when it's to talk about how to lay a flavor foundation for your soup. We start with that mirepoix that we talked about in the beginning. A lot of times, this isn't for every soup, but for a lot of soups, you sweat those aromatics in some fat. You could also include meat. So one of the popular things for some soups, or part of the recipe, is to cook some bacon, perhaps, or some other ground beef, and then remove the meat, set that aside, leave the fat in the pan, and use that fat to sweat the aromatics, or add olive oil or something else. And then add the fragrant herbs or spices. So that's what we're adding here. And then add vegetables, the vegetables that you might be including, whether it's broccoli or beans or carrots, more carrots, slices of carrots. It could be here. That's what we're doing here. And then adding the stock and or broth, if in the case of vegetables, any vegetable juices, any water. And then we bring it to a bit of a boil and skim anything that comes to the top that doesn't look appetizing. Nothing bad for you there, just doesn't look nice. And then toward the end, you add back in your cooked meats, your pasta, which has been cooked, your grains, which have been cooked. The benefit of having pre-cooked pasta and grains is that it doesn't make your soup cloudy. If you cook your pasta and your grains in your broth, you're going to get a thicker, starchier, more cloudy looking soup. Sometimes that's desirable, sometimes that is not. So your choice, but that's the reason. And then herbs and spices and greens that you might be using, like a green that would easily wilt, say a spinach. Kale takes a little longer. And sometimes you would like a little splash of acid in your soup just to perk the flavor, a little bit of lemon, a little bit of vinegar. That would be to your taste. You could try that if you tasted your soup and said, just needs a little something. That could be something that you might try. And then generally, if you're adding milk or cream to a soup, you would stir it in toward the end. So those are some soup making steps. And here are some recipes. These are pretty standard. Well, they're popular. Nothing exotic here. We're looking at vegetable beef soup and Italian minestrone. And I selected those two because they have similar steps, but one is very much a meat-based soup and one is vegetarian. And so I thought we could look at those two soup recipes and compare the differences. It must be dinner time. This just looks really good to me. Does anybody make vegetable soup? Or minestrone? Okay. It's very rude.
Another recipe for this Instant Pot that was minestrone, and I like it very much.
Okay, good. That Instant Pot is a little miracle worker, huh?
I never thought I would get one. If it wasn't for the pandemic, I probably wouldn't have, but
So you got it, and
it was on sale, and I started using it, and I love it. I use it almost every day.
Wow, that's a testimonial.
Yeah.
Anybody else have an Instant Pot? So I know that's something that people on the site on Get Set Up have expressed interest in. So at some point, hopefully we'll be doing more classes on Instant Pot. Maybe
Do you have
Kath-
one?
No, I do not have one. I have a pressure cooker,
Oh, okay.
the old fashioned kind. So I do
I
have.
had never used a pressure cooker first. So first, of course, I was afraid of it. I had originally got it for my daughter-in-law, and because they have two young kids, baby, 3 and under. And so I got it because it was $20 off at Costco. Well, thinking to give it to them, I thought, well, I'll try it, but I probably won't like it, but then I'll pass it to them because I know they can use it because they're growing a family, right? So I was in a conversation and I just said, well, oh, by the way, do you guys have an Instant Pot? And they said, oh yeah, it's still in the box. They got it when the second baby was born and they've never opened it. I go, well, then I opened mine and started using it. That's how I ended up with an Instant Pot.
And now you're glad you didn't have to give it away.
Yeah, I never thought, and they still haven't used it. And it's almost 2 years now that they've had it.
Well, there's no doubt that it takes a little time just to get used to doing something like that. So just the time to learn about it is, they probably don't have time for it with children, small children.
I love it. I love it.
Good. Well, maybe we'll talk later and you'll come on and talk about your experience with the Instant Pot sometime in a class. So in this recipe, we're using stew meat, and we're going to kind of dry it a little bit with paper towels. And then we're going to season it with salt and pepper and saute it in a couple of tablespoons of olive oil till it's brown. And probably do that in a couple batches, depending upon how much you have and how big your pot is, so that it actually sautés and browns rather than gets in there and close together and steam. You want it to brown. And then add more oil to the pot. And now you're going to saute, what is this? Onions, carrots, and celery. What do we call this? What is that?
That French word, right?
Mirepoix.
Yes, that's what it is. So then we add the mirepoix, saute that, and then add the aromatic garlic in this case, and saute it for a minute longer. And then we pour in the broth, the tomatoes, the beef that we took out, basil, oregano, thyme, salt, and pepper. Boil it a little bit, and then cover it and let it simmer for a while, for about 30 minutes or so. And then add the potatoes. So we start adding the vegetables according to how long it takes them to get finished. So the potatoes are going to take the longest. So we put them in and cook them for 20 minutes, then add green beans if you want at the same time, and simmer a little longer. And lastly, add in the corn and the peas. You always add corn and peas at the last because they don't need much cooking time at all. So it's these other harder vegetables that we have to simmer for a while. And there's no hard and fast rule here. Lima beans would go in here as well, or those cooked mixed vegetables. If you like to have carrots in, you can do that too. And that's it. And then you can garnish it with some fresh parsley. I just happened to notice that this vegetable soup didn't have any other carrots in it, which is unusual. My vegetable soup has everything with the kitchen sink in it, every kind of vegetable you can think of. So you could add okra in here, any vegetable that you like. So let's see how the minestrone differs in this case. Or is the same maybe. So now we don't have the protein that was from the beef that fills us up, that makes that a really robust kind of soup, that vegetable soup. So how are we going to replace that to make this just as robust? And that's through using beans, kidney beans in this case. They're rather meat-like, and also using some pasta. So that little ditalini, that little pasta or elbow pasta, or any kind of pasta that you really like. But we've got the same kinds of basic first ingredients. Here's our mirepoix and our garlic. Only in this one, we're going to use some of the softer vegetables like zucchini and yellow squash, but it includes green beans and rosemary, crushed tomatoes. We're using here, we can make this totally vegetarian by using our vegetable broth, or we can use chicken stock, whatever you would prefer. I love that these soups are so versatile. You can really make these work for any food lifestyle, basically. And if you do have a Parmesan cheese rind, if you get Parmesan cheese in the block, keep the rind, keep it in your cheese drawer, and use it for just this occasion to flavor your stock, flavor your soups, and then remove it at the end.
What is the rind? Is it the outside or the inside?
It's that end part, the hard part that you don't eat, that's the rind.
I guess I've never bought it that way.
Yeah, let's see if I can show you.
Like if it was a wedge, it would be the outside edge?
Yeah,
Okay.
so this is what it typically, let's see. So that's the ends. That's
And that's
the
the rind where the printing is?
uh-huh. There you go. That's the rind.
Oh, okay.
And there's no problem with using that, even though there's that printing. That's not anything bad. So yeah, you can save all of those in a little bag and use them for your soup. Nothing wasted. So that I'm surprised it's 6:23 and I am generally running right up to the minute in this class. So I'm pleased to be able to take a breath and be able to give you the opportunity to speak here and just ask questions. Talk about what you heard here and whether you think you'd like to try any of these, anything.
Hi, this is Alice.
Alice.
Yeah, I'm not opening my camera. I got the sun hitting me in the face.
That's okay.
Okay. I tried making a potato leek soup last night,
Uh-huh.
and I thought it was awful.
Oh, why?
Well, the potatoes were red potatoes. It didn't have any flavor. I don't know. I found a recipe online, I guess, and I tried using it. My sister gave me some red potatoes, and I had two leeks. I found this recipe, and I didn't have the sprig of something. I did the best I could with it, but it just was so bland.
Mhm.
You had an immersion blender that I bought a long time ago. I didn't realize it was broken when I opened it. The button for high and low was broken, but I was able to hold it on there to immerse it. It didn't do much, so I ended up putting the soup in the blender in portions. So now it's in my refrigerator. I told my sister I was going to bring her some, but I don't know what to do with it. I feel embarrassed that it just didn't taste good to me. The recipe did call for like a tablespoon of white vinegar.
Mhm.
I put that in there, salt, pepper, garlic. I started out by sauteing onions and garlic and the leeks
Mhm.
and a little bit of oil.
Mhm.
Then I put the potatoes in and some vegetable broth and water. And these are from what I remember, this is what I put in it. I don't know. I don't like the way it tastes. I used salt and pepper.
Yeah.
And I put the little bit of vinegar did make it taste a little bit better, but not much.
Yeah, it's interesting. The potato leek soup is a funny, when you think about it, you have the flavor of leeks, the onion flavor, but they're very mild. Potatoes
Yeah.
basically don't have any flavor
Mm-hmm.
on their own. So what we have to do is so I think that generally speaking, potato leek soup isn't really all that exciting to begin with, because I've had similar disappointment with
Okay.
potato leek soup. I think it's just the nature of potato leek soup, but you might try. So I'm looking at a recipe right now. I just want to see if there's some inspiration here. So in this recipe, they're using marjoram and thyme and parsley. And I think that's where you're going to end up with better flavor for a soup like that if you can put some herbs in there. And
So would you buy fresh herbs or dried?
um, I think I might try let me see what this recipe says as far as when they put it in. Depends on where. So what they're doing here is adding the parsley at the end. So that would be fresh. And they're using the marjoram, bay leaf, thyme, and salt when they add the broth. So you could use dry or fresh. And when you're using dry, you're using kind of like 1 teaspoon of dry equals a tablespoon of fresh. That's the breakdown there.
Okay.
You could try that, or more herbs to jazz it up, because the flavor of it is just generally very mild. The other thing that I find when I have a soup like that, I like curry, yellow curry, and I think it really makes a soup taste good to put some curry in it. I did it with some carrot soup that I made, ginger carrot soup. The other flavor that I think sometimes can bring a soup around, or even an egg dish around, is a little bit of nutmeg. So I don't suggest that you spoil your whole pot, but you might take just what I do when I'm experimenting is I just take a little bit of my soup out and put it into a small bowl and put a little bit of whatever it is I'm thinking about adding and heat it up in the micro or something and just taste it and see if I think that is going to do the trick for me. So I just say maybe experiment with some of those different flavors and see if you can hit upon something that kicks it up for you a little bit.
Okay, the spices.
Yeah.
This recipe also did call for plant milk. So I used some almond milk. I'm trying to be healthy, but
Yeah. It's a lot. There's a lot of trial and error and experimentation with this too. I can appreciate it.
mhm.
Yeah, it's disappointing though when you put time into a soup and then it doesn't taste the way you want it to. So good luck
Thank
with
you.
that. Maybe you can find see if you can experiment and see what you come up with. Let us know.
Okay.
So you're going to receive the notes from me, and that will have the recipe to the things that we talked about for both the stocks, the broths, and the vegetable and minestrone soups. And you'll get an opportunity to recommend a class to a friend in that email as well, and to give us feedback. So I mentioned that to you earlier. We really, really appreciate your feedback. And you can go right to viewing the schedule from that email too and book your next class. So when you do that, you can just click here, and this is how you can invite your friends. You can share it by email. You can copy and paste a link into a text, and it would be, think about whether it would be fun to get together with friends from another area, perhaps just in a class that you might all enjoy. That's something that is that other people have done and thought that worked out well for them. And we always appreciate when you let organizations in your neighborhood know about us, like the assisted living facilities or the senior centers or even the YMCA. That's how we get connected and get outreach to more seniors across the country and now across the world. So if you are ever interested in co-hosting with me, being part of a class where we can talk about something that you have a passion for, I would love to entertain that with you. And I would ask you to just reach out to us. We would be happy to have you do that. Happy to have you also be part of an interest group or lead an interest group if you have a passion for something. And so that kind of brings me to the end of my class today, and just want to give you another opportunity to make any other comments or ask any other questions before we say goodbye.
Thank you. It was very
much.
good.
Yes,
Thank
thank
you.
you.
Thank you so much for coming, and I hope to see you in more of my classes. I am going to be teaching cream soups tomorrow and great spring meals in 30 minutes. And we've got some fun other things going on here as well. So hope to
Thank
see
you. Bye.
you there.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.